So welcome back to the Explain the USA. As usual, Caleb is gonna explain some things about the USA, but this is gonna be different. But this is reaction to another video. I will leave it to Caleb.
So I found a video.
Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Top 10's Net, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 facts about America that make no sense to anyone else.
The patron saint of YouTube, Simon Whistler, allowed us to comment on his video because trying to make crazy things about America be a little bit more understandable is actually what we do on this channel. Today, I'm going to try to comment on the first 5 points in that video.
Okay,
So let's do it.
let's do it.
So let's take a look at Simon's first point.
Number 10, US toddlers shoot one person a week.
Toddlers? Yeah, toddlers, small children, like they just started walking, so 3, 4 years old.
Okay, toddlers.
And in fact, it's true, on average, they shoot about one person a week in the US. Now, we did a video all about guns in America, so check that out if you want more details. The fact is, there's about one gun per person in the US. There's
Right.
a lot of guns. But
Even countries that are swimming in guns like Serbia, Norway, and Switzerland don't have toddlers blowing one another away.
so it's not just the number of guns in the US. I think this has something to do with the culture of guns. And one element of this is that a lot of Americans feel that guns are necessary for them to protect their freedoms, to protect themselves against criminals, but also if the government becomes more controlling and
Right.
tyrannical, they should protect themselves against the government. Which means that for a certain percentage of Americans, any restriction on guns is a step towards dictatorship.
Right.
Which is why then you start to understand why there are no laws against, in some states, against children handling guns or being close to guns. A lot of states don't have laws about where you have to store your gun or keeping it safe. So when you have an attitude that guns should be freely available and there are lots of guns around, at some point in a country of over 300 million people, a child is going to
Right.
grab a gun and is going to accidentally shoot someone. Now, it is crazy, but I think it's an expression of the culture of guns in the US.
So it means the guns are not well secured
Some
because
states,
there are no laws for it.
some states do have laws that say if you own a gun, you must keep them stored correctly, and if you
Yeah.
don't, you're responsible for what happens with those guns. I don't think that's the majority of states, though.
Okay.
So in a lot of places, freedom.
Yeah.
So the next point is,
Number 9, bestiality is still legal in 9 US states, but premarital sex is outlawed.
Bestiality?
okay, it means having sex with animals.
Oh. Okay.
Yes, this topic just got real. This is a really complicated one. I think the first thing to explain is that in most cases, there is not a law that says bestiality is legal, have sex with all the animals you want. The way that the American legal system works is if there is not a law, it's legal.
Right.
So it just means some of the states never got around to making a law. They didn't care, or it wasn't important, or they just never passed a law saying specifically that it is
Yeah,
illegal
it's
to have.
forbidden.
Right. However, there is one territory, actually, Washington, D.C., that had a law, and in 1995, they actually removed the law, saying that bestiality was illegal.
Okay.
I have no idea why.
This would be odd enough if the US was a spectacularly licentious place, but it's not. In addition to allowing you to marry your bestest sow, 4 states still outlaw either premarital or extramarital sex, or cohabiting with your partner prior to marriage.
One thing I will point out, though, is that the states that have laws against premarital sex, those are not the same states where bestiality is legal. So the idea that in the US, bestiality is legal, but premarital sex is not, that won't be the case in the same state. And this is something really important to understand about the US on many topics, is that very often the states get to decide what they want to be legal or illegal on a lot of topics. So going from one state to the next can feel a lot like going into a different country. Sometimes the differences are quite extreme. And this is one of those cases. There are a couple of states where it is technically illegal to have sex before you are married. Now, the thing is, most of these would not be enforced.
Okay.
There's a lot of strange laws in the US, and it's because until it's actually removed and the legislators, the politicians decide to make an effort to say, we should remove this law, then it will stay on the books. Maybe it's 150 years old. I don't think that anyone is going to jail because they had sex with their boyfriend or girlfriend before they were married. But it is technically law.
So it could be.
Number 8. The highest paid public employee in 39 states is a sports coach. For those from outside the US, this seems less extravagant and more like an absolute inability to get their priorities right.
So when it comes to public employees, people who work for the government, in 39 of the 50 states, it's actually the sports coach, usually for the college sports team.
For college?
The college sports
That's funny.
team. Now, as a European, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I know there's a lot of money in the sport, but definitely not like in the college one, like the best team the country has. I know there's a lot of money for the players and for the managers too, but like for the school ones,
And that would
it's very
be
strange.
private, because the sports teams are private companies. So this is actually public employees. They work for the government, so it means they're a sports coach for the university.
Okay, so
And this is something that almost no other country has, is the importance of sports at the college and university level is really, really strong. So for a university to be successful, they have to have many sports teams, and the more successful their team
it
is,
doesn't matter if it's a sport college. It can be any college, and the sport is like the by side, but it's still so important.
yeah. I mean, then any university that manages to be successful in sports will be greatly helped by national recognition. They'll become more famous, more students will want to go there. And this is why a lot of American students get sports scholarships, which I don't think exists in Europe. To go to university, you would not get extra money because you're good at a sport to go to university.
Yeah, I think you wouldn't get it from the school, but you could get it like from the sponsors.
Okay, all right. In the US, if you're going to play on like the football team or the basketball team for a university, you will probably get a scholarship for that because they want to have the best players. And it brings in a lot of money because people buy tickets to go to the games.
Okay.
Therefore, paying the coach millions and millions of dollars, and sometimes it could be $10 million a year, it pays for itself to be able to get the very best coach, but it creates like this cycle of, if you want the best coach, they know they can ask for more and more money because they will bring in more and more money, and it just starts to get ridiculous. It means at the university, often the coach of the football team, it's almost always the football team, is paid more than the president of the university.
American football.
American football, yeah.
Number 7. Over half of all Americans don't hold a valid passport.
It's probably changing how Americans tend to explore the world more beyond
It's
their
getting better.
own country.
I would say it's getting better very quickly. In fact, just in 2017, 21 million new passports were given. And compared to in 1997, so 20 years before, it was just 6 million. So more and more Americans are traveling abroad. They are getting passports. But
Look at Australia, a country nearly as big as the US and more cut off from the rest of the world. According to official data, 1/3 of the population goes abroad every single year. That compares to 50% of Americans over their entire lifetimes.
So this is true. I mean, Australia is very far away from everything. Australia is a big country, but Australians still go abroad much, much more than Americans. So I have to say that even though it's getting better, there is still a large percentage of Americans that either are not interested in going abroad or are worried about going abroad. There is a lot of nervousness in the US about going to a foreign country. I think there's a lot of fear about crime. Some people assume that other countries hate Americans, so maybe they could be like mistreated because they are Americans. They could be robbed or murdered. Or
Well, I understand how as a lot of Americans doesn't have to go outside because they have many different countries and they have like
different states.
different states and different terrain, beaches.
There's a lot to
winter,
visit in
everything.
the US.
It's like a whole world almost.
In some
I
ways.
understand why like you can spend whole life just there and exploring something.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's easier.
It is easier. And I think there are some Americans who just don't see a reason to go outside of the country because there's so many things to visit. But then there are some who think that it could be dangerous to go outside of their country. And as it's easier and easier to travel, and I think we do have more information about other countries, I think this is getting better over time. So.
Number 6. 30% of Americans prefer saving money to vital medical treatment. Faced with a serious illness or injury, around 30% of Americans would rather walk it off than pay for treatment. This, well, it simply doesn't happen anywhere else.
All right, so we talked earlier, it's our longest video actually, talking about American medical systems. If you want a few more details about that, check out that video on our channel. The fact is that, the American medical system is very expensive. As Simon says in his explanation, it's not the best one. In the developing world, it's probably the worst one. And the fact is, in other countries, there's no risk of going bankrupt if you go for expensive medical treatment. And in the US, there is. I mean, it's difficult to count exactly how many people go bankrupt because of medical expenses. Some studies, scientific studies, say all the way up to 2 million people a year. It's at least hundreds of thousands of Americans every year go bankrupt and lose their house, lose their car, lose everything because they had some medical costs. I think also the system is very unpredictable. So if you go in, like your finger is hurting or you like got some injury to your arm, we hear stories that you go in, you think there's just a small problem, and they say, "Oh yeah, we have to treat you right now. It's an emergency, and it's like $50,000, something like that." I don't know how common that is, but I do know that Americans are worried about that happening. We don't know how much things will cost before we go, and even if you're in pain, if you think that, okay, but if I go to a hospital, this could actually ruin the financial future of my family.
But just a small question. If you go to the hospital and you're going to find out it's going to cost a lot.
It's true.
Can you just decide? Like,
you
go
can.
for it?
You can.
Or don't?
Of course. But just getting the tests to find out what is wrong
very expensive.
Could still be quite expensive.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think because of that uncertainty and that fear, it's understandable to me that a lot of Americans just decide to avoid it. Like, I'd rather not know until I'm falling down.
Yeah.
Because I have that also, even being here in Europe, and I know that it's going to be fine. I'm worried about the medical costs going to the doctor, which is insane because it's not going to cost anything in the Czech Republic. But I still have that nervousness about the financial cost when I think about going to the doctor. The other one thing that's different about the US is the level of debt. Because Americans have a lot of debt on credit cards, student loans, and often, even if they have a good job, sometimes they're just making it anyway. If you suddenly have a $10,000 medical bill, that could crush you. So because we don't save a lot, we're not prepared for these costs. And then often we just avoid it and try to and hope that it fixes itself. That was the first 5 points in this video. In the American context, there's a reason these things are the way they are, even if it's different than the rest of the world. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the next 5 points that Simon brings up.
If you want to learn something more about the USA, please subscribe.
And you'll learn about all the weird things, and everything will be perfectly logical to you by the end, right?
Right. Or if
Right.
you have some question, like a weird question, you want us to answer, please do. Leave the comment in the comment section.
Yep. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in the second video.